Welcome to Movie Mash. Today, we're going to recap a crime comedy movie called We're the Millers. Please don't forget to subscribe for more interesting movie recaps. David watches YouTube at home when he's texted about the goods. He confirms and sets off, hitting a mom, broker, and chef. His clientele's thriving. He meets Ricky, an old college pal, and gifts him some kush. Ricky's shocked he's still dealing but admires David's freedom. He has no commitments and could vanish anytime without anyone noticing, which sounds bleak. Rose is a dancer at a club, dislikes her job, David's neighbor, and they don't get along. Kenny asks about buying, but David doesn't sell to minors, even though Kenny's 18. Kenny sees thugs harassing Casey, a homeless girl, and steps in, but they beat him up. David saves him and Kenny reveals he's a dealer, which angers the thugs. They threaten David with a knife and demand his backpack. David runs and they chase him. He jumps into a dumpster but accidentally closes it with his backpack, landing on the lid. The thugs break into his apartment and steal everything. David ignores calls from his supplier, but two men in a black Jeep tase and kidnap him. They take him to Brad's estate, where he's standing on plastic wrap to avoid messing anything up. Brad laughs and says it's for a new skylight, an aquarium with a whale. David owes Brad a substantial amount, but Brad proposes win-win scenario. Brad needs a small amount of kush delivered from Mexico, but his usual courier was killed. He wants David to be his mule since he's trustworthy. If David succeeds, his debt will be cleared and he'll get a $100,000 bonus. Kenny suggests a disguise, but David rebuffs him. When a family asks for directions, David realizes he needs a family and an RV to avoid suspicion. David visits Rose to recruit her as his wife. He will pay her $10,000. Rose refuses. She does not trust him. David recruits Kenny with no problem, and he suggests another member, Casey. She agrees to do it for $1,000. Kenny meets his new sister. Rose's manager informs her that there is a slight change in the club's policy. He wants her to sleep with the customers. Rose quits on the spot, even though she's strapped for cash. David is at the barbershop, giving Kenny and Casey money so they can buy new clothes. On second thought, Kenny already looks like a nerd, so he snags his money and gives it to Casey. David sits down, and the hairdresser asks him what he wants, something that looks like he gets up at 5:30 in the morning, commuting an hour and a half for some BS job. The man behind him coughs and says, "Right here." They are at the airport. David gives his papers to the security, and the guard says he's good. Casey is an angel in the photo and in real life. Kenny, though, sussy, full body check. On the plane, Rose arrives unexpectedly. She asks for 30 grand instead of 10, and she will be in. David agrees. They arrive as their RV rolls up, and off they go. Casey notices a stand with fireworks and begs David to stop, but he refuses. Then Kenny and Rose join in the chant. He yells at everyone and says they are not a real family. They reach the Mexico border, and the guard just lets them through. David is shocked that it actually worked. They arrive at a huge gate with several armed guards. They are let in. Everyone who isn't shy has a gun in their hands. The whole situation doesn't faze David. On the other hand, others are concerned. When he meets the supposed boss, One Eye threatens him with a gun until he mentions that Pablo Chacon sent him, Brad's presumed alias. David tells him he's with his family, and One Eye invites him in. It's more than a smudge of kush, it's 2 tons. David calls Brad, and he's actually surprised they are giving him the goods, like he's not sure saying it's for Pablo Chacon would have worked. The RV is packed. Snoop Dogg would love this fridge. There's a spider crawling around on the fruits. They leave the camp, and on the way out, an officer is waiting for them. Unfortunately, they don't have that much, so he'll accept something more personal. David gets the hint. Rose sucks him off. Rose is not going to do it. The officer tells her not to worry. He's more into men. David calls Kenny outside, who is unaware of his intentions. He explains the plan and that he needs to satisfy the officer. Kenny refuses. He doesn't swing that way. David asks him to do it for the girls, for Casey, and he agrees. The cop comes in and asks what's the holdup. Will someone do it, or will I get 1,000 pesos? Turns out he didn't mean dollars. David hands him a 100, and they go on their way. At the border, the Fitzgerald family pulls up beside them in an RV. Millers want to stay low, and they reluctantly welcome them. Their daughter Melissa takes a liking to Kenny. When it's their turn to be, security guard tells them to pull up. They put on their hats. The guard greets David and asks him if they are bringing anything from Mexico that he should know. David is scared and speechless. The dog starts barking and they get pulled over for an inspection. Just as the inspector is about to search the RV, 5 illegal immigrants who were hiding under the RV run off. The inspector apologizes for the inconvenience and sends them on their way. They are glad that everything went well, turn up the music and have a blast. Meanwhile, Pablo Chacon arrives and finds out his pot has been taken, so they go after it. Back to the Millers, they are driving a 15-ton vehicle up a slope. Their engine breaks down. Casey and Rose head out to get help. Moments later, Fitzgeralds pull up and give them a ride. They know a mechanic who can help them. In the RV, the woman, Eddie, inquires with David about how Rose and he met. David tells the true story of how they met in her flat, and it is truly amazing how detailed he remembers it and surprises Rose with it. Don asks David to get the map out of the glove box. That's when he notices a badge and a gun. Don is an off-duty D agent. This makes them nervous, and they go to have a family meeting. Their plan is to shake off Fitzgerald's family as soon as possible, but unfortunately, the repair garage is closed, so they have to camp out for the night. When Eddie tries to take the baby from Rose so she can have some free time, she fights back and ends up throwing the pot blanket into the road, getting it run over twice. Eddie is hysterical, but Casey saves the day by telling her that the baby was her school project. It was not a real baby. They apologize to the Gerald family. In the evening, they make a bonfire and sing some songs. They also play a drawing game where the answer to Melissa's drawing is plain and simple. No one could get it right. Kenny is up next. He had to draw a skateboard. It's a little misleading. After the games, Kenny has a nice chat with Melissa. Melissa leans for a kiss, but he just hugs her. David goes to comfort him and ends up giving him some solid advice. Casey feels sorry for Kenny, and she decides to teach him how to kiss. Wouldn't say Casey enjoys it. They continue practicing when David and Rose return. Rose joins in and asks him to show her what he's learned. Not bad, she teaches him another technique. David is just a spectator at this point. Suddenly, Melissa shows up and is shocked by what's going on. Don drives Millers to the garage where their RV should be fixed. The Fitzgeralds head off. David goes in to get his RV. Brad calls and asks him where he is. He should have been back by now. He explains the situation and says he'll be back soon when he sees the mechanic tied to a chair. Pablo has located them. David hands him the phone. Brad gets scared and hangs up. One Eye is here too. They found them through a transmitter planted in the pot. The Millers argue amongst themselves, revealing that they are not a real family. When Pablo learns that Rose is a dancer, he asks her to perform. Rose starts taking off her clothes, climbs the stairs, gets on her trusty pole, and soaks herself. A great performance by Rose. Kenny barely manages to keep his hands to himself. Rose distracts Pablo with her chest massage and opens the hot steam valve, while David takes a wrench and smacks One Eye. Kenny manages to run One Eye over. They all get into the RV. Kenny is still behind the wheel, destroying Pablo's car while being shot at. David tries to take the wheel and the fruits fall down with the spider. The spider climbs on Kenny's leg. The RV goes off the main road, but everyone is fine. Except Kenny, the spider bit him. He runs outside and the others follow. It looks like it really hurts. Rose asks him to show her his balls. He drops his pants, as this is a family-friendly video. David is still arguing with Rose that he doesn't have time to drive him to the hospital until Kenny passes out. Once at the hospital, David calls Brad. Brad is surprised to find David still alive. David threatens to double-cross Brad and give Pablo the smidgen of the pot. Brad offers him $500,000 in compensation if he delivers the goods by tonight. The doctor tells them that Kenny could be released in a few hours, but that does not sit well with David. He needs Kenny and his giant nut out of here now. Even after he explains the situation to Rose and Casey, they decide to stay. A boy comes over to the RV, Scotty P., a well-mannered young man, if you know what I'm saying. He's here to pick up Casey. Before they leave, Rose decides to chat with him a bit. They inquire about his tattoos, especially the one on his collarbone, no regrets. Casey is very uncomfortable with the whole situation, so she and Scotty leave. Afterwards, Rose and David bond. She reveals that Rose is her stage name. Her real name is Sarah, and they almost share a moment when Casey comes back from her ride. They scold her for being gone so long like real parents would. They finally manage to retrieve Kenny. He rushes him to the RV but drops him, explaining that he's in a hurry because the deadline for the job is in 4 hours and blurts out that $500,000 are on the line. You're making $500,000 and only giving me 30 grand. I'm only getting 1,000. You guys are getting paid. Casey walks away angry. Rose and Kenny refuse to leave without her. David angrily tells them they deserve each other and drives off. Pablo finds out their whereabouts and Casey meets up with Scotty. David calls Brad to tell him he'll be back in 3 hours. A little while later, he obviously misses them. Casey tells Scotty about her problems related to the whole trip, but he just wants to get it going. Rose intervenes, telling him to keep his hands to himself. The situation escalates and Rose punches the kid. David has come back to them, but they are not so pleased to see him. They wait for an apology, but he keeps talking nonsense because his pride gets in the way. They want David to beg for their forgiveness, and so he does. On the way to the RV, they run into Fitzgerald's. To redeem himself, Kenny tells her that they just smuggled some pot and are not a real family. While they are trying to cover it up with lies, One Eye walks up to them. He points his gun at David, but then Don opens the door of the RV and beats him up with a huge mug. Melissa is about to call the cops when Pablo takes her hostage. David hands him the keys to the RV. They say he doesn't have to kill them since he has his pot back. He lists that they forced him to cross the border, burned his face, destroyed his car, and beat up his companion twice. He doesn't have to shoot them, but he wants to. David begs him not to shoot anyone but him. At that moment, fireworks distract him and David manages to throw the gun out of his hand. Somehow Rose grazes Pablo and Kenny comes up with a knockout punch. He makes out with Melissa using the technique Rose taught him. David and Rose also make out. Don arrests Pablo and makes out with Eddie. He lets the Millers go. The next day, David is at Brad's place to deliver the goods, but the deadline was last night, so no deal. He realizes that Brad would never pay him, no matter the outcome. Suddenly, the D storms the place. He has informed them with Don's help. He doesn't get the money, but in exchange, he and his fake family are put under witness protection for 3 to 6 months. Some time later, David waters his plants in the suburbs and introduces his family to the neighbors. We are the Millers. Happy ending, but some things never change. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more interesting recaps.